I'm Richard David Grundy from Northern California. My occupation was environmental health and engineering. I was drawn into science when I was in high school, and Sputnik flew over my high school. My teacher said, "You have a facility for mathematics and science. You should become a scientist." My inspiration started with two of my uncles who had served in World War II. One of them went on as an engineer who worked on the Atlas missile here in California, and a second uncle who was a graduate of Berkeley and went on to work for Kaizen Engineers, and they were my tutors when I was in school. Ever since the 6th grade, I had a facility with mathematics, and later in high school, a facility with physics, and constantly wanted to discover what was on the frontier of science. It wasn't until my mid-20s that I actually felt I had a career path. It started with me being hired into the nuclear weapons program to do environmental monitoring. And I had a background in electronic engineering and public health. I was trained in electrical engineering at Stanford. I did graduate work at University of California, Berkeley in public health and nuclear engineering. I happened to get my degree in electrical engineering at the time when everybody was converting from vacuum tubes to transistors, and I wanted to work on that interface and just happened to be in the right places at the right time. I worked in the Pacific during nuclear testing, and then I went to graduate school at Berkeley and studied environmental health. Already established in the field, I one day was asked by a congressional committee if I would come and be the resident expert on air and water pollution. And I did that when I was 40 years old, and it turned into a career. I became a scientific counselor to members of the U.S. Senate for 28 years. I was better at explaining science to non-scientists than I was at doing scientific research. Working at the United States Senate in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, working on clean air and clean water and national energy policy. During the time that we created the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Energy. Later in life, I was inspired by a professor from Stanford named Rolf Eliasson, who was an environmental engineer who had worked for President Eisenhower. And he told me that I had a facility to present the scientific stuff, and I should stay in Washington and accept the position in that was offered to me in the United States Senate. Again, it's all timing, and I didn't plan it that way. Well, my personal achievements were being advisor on clean air and clean water and national energy policy, and that led on to actually being a member of the U.S. delegation on climate change at the United Nations in Geneva. All of my grandparents were immigrants. and all of their children were curious about understanding the United States and what it was and what it stood for. Curiosity is essential. I liked interpreting science in the context of public health and protection of people from the environmental effects of energy development. I was an editor on 2 books on the health effects of consumer products and a separate book on the health effects of air pollution. My legacy I would like to leave to the people that are concerned about applying science to public policy. I do not feel that in the present environment, people are concerned about their decisions being consistent with basic and valid science. And I would like to change that. I think it is important to be curious about life and what is out there, and not accept simple answers, and be curious enough to explore an interdisciplinary career. That was what was advocated when I was a teenager, and I do not see being advocated anymore. I would advocate that the younger people be curious about the world around them, and pursue what they're interested in, not what they're told they should pursue. I would advise that if you're going to participate in public policy formulation, you have to have an escape. It's very stressful dealing with people who are very opinionated. I chose to raise orchids, and I built up a very large orchid collection of 4,000 plus plants, and I spent my weekends going to flower shows and orchid things, because otherwise I would have had high blood pressure and a heart attack. And so find something that you really enjoy doing and use it as an escape. I would like to remember to somebody who made a contribution to public health and environmental quality. I was inspired by people like René Dubos, who wrote The Population Bomb, and people like that the world was a limited environment, and it is us to preserve it and protect it for future generations. And I would like to be remembered as somebody who contributed to doing that.